Welcome to Point Blank, brought to you by our friends at Fitz Roofing. I am Brandon Strange, joined as always by ESPN Houston's Joel Blank of the Press Box. Joel, thanks for joining us today. I had a special conversation lined up with us because this weekend was the 25th anniversary of the Rockets, the second of the Rockets' back-to-back championships in 1995. You were there with the team during this time, so I definitely wanted to speak with you. You were the director of broadcasting at the time. I think it's also fair to say that the season can be divided into two parts, before Drexler and after Drexler. So let's start with before. The team was 30-17. Vernon Maxwell was suspended for punching a Blazers fan in Portland. So talk about the trajectory of the Rockets team before the Clyde Drexler trade.
There's no doubt there was a championship hangover. The fact that they had really enjoyed themselves in winning the first title. They celebrated throughout the summer. And I think coming back, knowing that the team was going to be intact, a lot of guys just wrote it down as an assumption on their part that they were just going to do the same things. And no matter what happened to get through the regular season, that by the time playoffs came around, they were going to be able to flip the switch, be able to and fully capable of competing for another title, and that nothing was going to change. And they weren't aware of the fact that behind the scenes, as you mentioned, the Maxwell situation was one of the deals that they were worried about, and the other was the complacency. The fact that the guys were taking the season a little too light had Carol Dawson and Rudy Tomjanovich and their staff very concerned, and basically were uncovering every stone, trying to think of a way that they might be able to make this team better and or at least get them to focus on concentrating on trying to win another title.
What was the mood after the trade? Because obviously Olajuwon was happy. Vernon Maxwell was not, as reported. What was the mood of the team like?
I think there was a lot of excitement. I think you had a lot of really classy veterans on the team that were going to just deal with whatever the situation was and try to make the best of it. Mario Elie was a guy that had played with Clyde in Portland. He was excited. There were guys that said, hey, look, for as good as Otis Thorpe was for this team, the fact that you're bringing an all-star of the caliber of Clyde Drexler home, and he's hungry because he hasn't won one before. Once they got over the initial shock of losing a guy they were very close to in Otis Thorpe, they were excited about the fact that, hey, it may take some time, but in the long run, Clyde could be the guy that pushes them over the top and allows them to truly compete for a second title.
Well, that turned out to indeed be the case. And last week we found out that that Drexler trade almost didn't happen. But before we get into that, Joel, why don't you tell our viewers about our deals at Fitz Roofing?
Yeah, Fitz Roofing's been great for the people of Houston. During the pandemic, they were out there doing minor repairs for free, and now they're back to regular business as usual, and that means you guys need to capitalize. From roof repairs to an entire new roof on your business or your house, they take care of everything, and they do free, no-obligation inspections every single day. All you got to do is pick up the phone, 832-521-3001. They'll come to you, tell you what they can do, and they'll go back on their way. You get back in touch with them. They do fantastic work. Fitz Roofing, making a difference one home at a time.
Joel, last week, former Blazers and Sonics GM Bob Whitsitt was a guest on George Karl's podcast. Whitsitt, who was Portland's new GM at the time, was told they needed to rebuild, and so he reached out to the Seattle Supersonics and their new GM, Wally Walker, and they proposed a Drexler for Kendall Gill trade, but Wally was skeptical. Let's take a listen to that audio.
Clyde is salivating to win it, and you're one of the teams he just got so excited about he would play for. You can't stand it. And I said it's a simple, straight up deal. Well, why would you do it, Bob? Thinking if Bob wants to do it, it must be bad for Seattle. I said, no, I'm a long ways away. I got to rebuild this thing. I'm starting over, and I'm tearing it down. So I'm not your competitor. And he finally just said, look, I'm not comfortable making a deal with you, so we'll pass. I said, well, Wally, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to trade him to Houston. And sure enough, I think they were seeded 6th. Clyde went down there, and they found a way to repeat on it. But I still believe to this day, Gill for Drexler, Seattle wins the championship. There's not even a doubt in my mind.
Okay, so he says the Sonics would have won a chip that year with Drexler. Do you agree with that?
I think Clyde was a chip that could have helped a lot of teams get a title. I think that he was a guy that had said for all the time he had put in Portland that time was running out, and the elusive thing that when you see a guy with a career like his, and we've seen it with Ewing and Stockton and Malone and guys like that, the elusive thing is if you don't have a title, that's what you're chasing at the end of your career, to be the capper that makes it easier to get in the Hall of Fame and makes a lot of people think of you as an all-time great. Seattle had a good team. Seattle was a team that probably could have maximized using Clyde Drexler just the way that the Rockets did. Luckily for the Rockets, that they were able to pull off the deal that they did, and the results obviously are history. But I think Seattle was fully capable of taking a guy like Clyde with the guys they had around him and turning that into a title as well.
Interesting thing about that was they didn't exactly set the league on fire. They went 17-18 following that trade. So you've lost Thorpe, you don't have Maxwell, and you've got this trade now where you've kind of essentially broken up a championship team. Was there a sense of buyer's remorse going into the playoffs?
I think there was a little bit of an uncertainty publicly, I think from the media's perspective, from the fans' perspective, but I think that internally, the one thing that the guys kept saying was this is going to take time, because not only was the shock of the guys that were no longer there, it was implementing the new guy who his whole career had the ball in his hands and was the focal point of an offense in Portland, and now he was going to be one of the main cogs in a Houston offense that not only was going to have to adjust to him, but he was going to have to adjust to them, and Akeem was going to have to adjust as well, getting his good friend Clyde. It's one thing to be friends and have played together in college, but to run the system they were running and to be able to have the time to be able to have it all gel, it was going to take time. So the rest of that regular season was a wash as they took a lot of losses in games they should have won, but they were learning each other along the way, and that goes back to the veteran presence I was talking about. When you start talking about Kenny Smith and Mario Elie and the guys that were veterans on that team that understood, hey, we can do this if we all just gel at the right time, and they did, and there's something to be said about the hot team playing at the right time, and the rest is history in the fact that they turned over the record books. Never had we seen a 6 seed go all the way to the title. They eliminated every top seed along the way, so you can't say they didn't play everybody they were supposed to play or get by in order to deserve and earn the title, and they won it in spectacular fashion.